Hello and welcome to a special edition of Big Centre TV's film show. I'm joined this week by the channel's Director of Operations, Julie Pickering, who's overseeing an exciting new part of our weekend programming. It's called They Don't Make Them Like This Anymore, and that's because, well, they don't. The films we're showing in our new Sunday night slot are, shall we say, unique. Julie, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a bit about how this Sunday night slot then came about.
Well, we received the offer of a whole bunch of retro movies, and when I looked through them, I discovered that they completely ticked my box in terms of so awful, they're absolutely brilliant B-movies. So when I looked down the list, there were lots of great stuff there, horror, kung fu, monsters, and I thought this is something that we need to be showing on Big Centre TV. And
the vast majority of them are from like mid-late 50s to the mid-60s, aren't they? That time when people were pushing the boundaries with special effects, in quotes.
That's right, sort of looking at that time when people were going to the drive-ins, when going to the cinema was really popular, people just wanted some escapism, some fantasy, and people were starting to be a bit more creative with trying to create those effects on the screen, with some success and with some failure.
And I love the ones that fail spectacularly. They're always the ones that are the most fun, aren't they? So this is a bit of a nod to sort of Alex Cox's Movie Drome that used to be on at the weekend, isn't it?
That's right, and it's actually in the same slot, which was one of the things that excited me, that 10 o'clock on a Sunday night slot. I watched that show every week, and it really opened my mind to some of the movies that were out there. There's some movies that I watched as part of that I've just never forgotten. So when that slot came up, I thought, right, I can't resist this, to the point that I even put myself forward for doing little introductions. I'm no Alex Cox, but I will certainly give it a shot.
You're our Alex Cox. That's the thing that matters. I have to say, you know, with me and my role as a film critic, I'm loving this because a lot of these films I've never seen before either, and you unearth gems, don't you, where maybe you find an early debut appearance for somebody that went on to be a massive Hollywood megastar sometime.
Well, that's it. One of the examples I can give is that I didn't actually realise that there was an original version of The Little Shop of Horrors, and Steve Martin's performance as the dentist in the remake is one of my favourite, only to find out that Jack Nicholson
was in it, wasn't he?
Actually played the dentist in the original.
That's
so
right.
That's fun. You can do a little bit of people spotting to see where people started out.
Like the Before They Were Famous sort of show then. Let's have a look at some of them, because the titles of some of these films are just so great as well, aren't they? They're going to be showing on Sundays at 10 o'clock over the next few weeks. The one I love, let's have a look at this one first. It's called Attack of the Giant Leeches, isn't it? Before we see a clip, tell us about this one.
So this is your classic horror movie where people start disappearing and you've got people trying to figure out what's happening, and basically it's a swamp where rednecks are disappearing. They think maybe it's alligators, but it turns out to be giant leeches, which of course is fantastic costumes that look like giant sleeping bags with big plastic teeth.
The leech costume does have to be seen to be believed. It's worth a look just for that, isn't it?
Absolutely, you're just waiting for that reveal, yes.
Let's have a look at a clip.
No, please stay away. Please.
Not exactly inviting, is it? That sure isn't. Hold her steady, Mike.
So, Attack of the Giant Leeches, made in 1959. And again, I've seen the trailer. I'm looking forward to seeing the full-length feature of that one as well. What else have we got? A film called Star Pilot, I see, just changing the mood from...
Yes, and with this one we bring ourselves into glorious Technicolor, in fact oversaturated Technicolor. It's a fantastic Italian space opera, so one of the lovely things about these B-movies is the terrible dubbing and the fun that they must have had trying to dub these movies and to do it correctly. But this is lovely. You've got a group of guys who are taken hostage to repair an alien spaceship, but of course all of the people on the spaceship are beautiful, scantily clad female vixen sort of types, with a couple of guys in leotards standing alongside them with very fake-looking ray guns. So this one really is a hoot. It's absolutely brilliant.
You've sold that to me now. Now we've got to look at a trailer for this one. Here's a little bit of this one.
Shortly after, it was destroyed by an earthquake. We fell into a resulting crevice and were compelled to go into hibernation. According to your methods of measuring time, we have been here 2 years, And now the day has come for us to return to our own galaxy. We have 2 more days at most, and you, Professor Solmy, are going to help us.
That's ridiculous. How can I?
And to begin with, I'd like to introduce Artie and Belsie, my officers. My name is Cain. As for the rest of our crew, you saw what happened to them.
I'm sorry, but I think you're expecting too much of us.
This one was in that time, wasn't it, where in the mid 60s the colour palette was going crazy, wasn't it? Going berserk. Everything was 100% plus another 50 on top of it.
That's it, and I mean, just even the colour of the lady's hair is amazing. You need your shades on in order to be able to watch it. But yeah, this one's really kooky, really good fun.
And lots of, I didn't recognise too many names in this one, but I'm sure I recognised lots of faces, because in the mid 60s a lot of the Italian stars were trying to make their way into mainstream cinema.
That's it, and then they pop up much later in in much more serious movies, but they can't escape their B-movie past.
No, absolutely. Now, I think arguably my favourite title for all of the films that we've got lined up is Wasp Woman. 1959, this one. This is, we're back in black and white times, aren't we now? This is, I mean, the story in itself is just so ridiculous that you just have to watch.
It's fantastic, and it's kooky, but at the same time there's a real bit of psychological terror and sort of mystery with this one. You know, the quest for eternal youth, what people will do to preserve their beauty. You know, there was always kind of a psychological slant on these. Really good dialogue in this film, you know, delivered with a bit cheesy, but really good dialogue, really well thought out. And of course you're waiting to see what happens to her after she signs up for this magical wasp-based serum that is going to give her the secret of eternal youth. You kind of know it's going to go the wrong way, so you're just waiting for that to happen.
It's a forerunner of the stories that Marvel just recycle now, don't they, for all their comic book heroes?
Absolutely,
exactly the same sort of thing.
Absolutely classic, and you know, brilliant actors and actresses. And I do love the black and white films. I really think they've got that moody kind of aura that just really resonates.
Do you want to see a bit of Wasp Woman? Of course you do. Let's have a look at that.
Anytime, Miss Dolan.
Have Mr. Zinthrop come in.
Yes, Miss Darling.
You can go in now, sir.
Oh. About time.
Janet Starlin Enterprises.
Miss Darling?
Yes. How do you do? I'm afraid I won't be able to give you much time, Mr. Zinthrop.
But it is I who give you the time, Miss Darling. Oh, yes. Plenty time I give you. 10, maybe 15 years I give you.
I want you to understand one thing very clearly, Mr. Zinthrop. I expect absolute proof of what you claimed in your letter. Tangible proof, not words.
Such proof you shall get, madame, and more. But I think I better show you in the laboratory, yes?
All right. Come in.
Look.
They look terrible. Why don't you put them out of their misery?
Madame, you ask for proof. Please be kind enough to look at proof you ask for. May I proceed? Thank you. Now, come, little bit. In a few minutes, madame, you shall see a miracle you shall not believe.
So, Julie, tell us a bit about how do we get hold of these movies? What happens to them? They're obviously made. They may be shown at cinemas in the sort of picture houses as double bills back in the day, and then they disappear. They don't necessarily find their way onto DVD. What happens to them? How do we acquire them?
Well, part of that is understanding what the B-movie is. The B-movie, very much like the B-side of a single, was the movie that was usually played as part of a double feature, but it was the one that was considered not very good, and that means that nobody really took took ownership of it. And a lot of these movies people just walked away from, or they didn't renew the copyrights on, and that means that they're quite available to us in order to show on the screens. Of course, the B-movie sort of definition changed then to being more of a just a cheap movie, a sort of schlock sort of attempt at doing some kind of genre. But that's where it started originally, and as I said, a lot of people just walked away from these movies, and that means that we're lucky enough to be able to show them now.
And the great thing is, for a lot of people, this will be the first time they've actually seen these films. So stick with us, because after the break we've got many more, lots of crazy B-movie trailers to show you, and remember, they're all coming up at 10 o'clock on a Sunday. We'll be back in a second. Welcome back to Brummywood Yammywood. I'm joined this week by Big Centre's Director of Operations, Julie Pickering, to review our Sunday night season of B-movies. Now, Julie, we talked about some fabulously evocative films before the break. Arguably the most famous of the B-movies that we've got as part of this season is Night of the Living Dead, isn't it? Which almost needs no introduction, but I'm going to ask you to introduce it anyway.
No problem. Well, this is an amazing score. This is George A. Romero's original zombie flick. There's been an awful lot to follow. And even though there was sort of zombies in the kind of Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney, they kind of had an envisaging of a zombie, but it was George A. Romero who really did the zombie as we recognise it now, you know, like we see in The Walking Dead and this kind of thing. Same thing again, it's kind of a psychological horror, really, about a group of people who are trapped in an abandoned farmhouse, who are trying to figure out how to escape from the plague of zombies that are outside. But just beautifully shot, definitely groundbreaking, and one we're absolutely thrilled to have on the agenda.
Terrific. Let's have a little look at Night of the Living Dead. I think it's fair to say, isn't it, at the moment, zombie movies are very much in vogue. Yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of people on the Brummywood Yammywood sofa, local filmmakers, who are all seem to be making zombie, futuristic horror films, and so many of them mention George A. Romero as their driving force, their inspiration, the sort of the father, really, of these sort of films. And it's a reminder when you see this, isn't it, as to just why it took people in such a different direction. And
absolutely, and what I love is that it's kind of minimal on the gore. It's there in black and white, so it's not like you can have loads of blood and special effects and that kind of thing, but the terror, the horror, it remains. It really was absolutely groundbreaking, yeah. And filmmakers, I think, can learn a lot from that sort of thing, because I sit here most weeks and say some of the best films, psychological films, are the ones that leave a lot of that to your imagination. Absolutely.
Instead of just putting it out on the screen in front of you.
Yeah.
It's cheaper as well, isn't it? So.
For sure.
Now, 3 or 4 more to get through. Missile to the Moon, 1958. I'd never heard of this film before, never mind even seeing it. What's this one all about? So this is just hilarious for the monsters. It is like Star Trek 20 years earlier. The imaginings back then, 1958, people wondering what it was like on the moon. So a lot of these stories were very popular, where they kind of imagined what would happen when you got there. The spider has to be seen to be believed, but my favourite absolutely is the rock creatures. They look like something out of, they look like Gumby, that character Gumby. Guys dressed in lots of foam, wandering up and down, trying to be terrifying. But yes, the dialogue in this, the special effects, the costumes, absolutely amazing. They really put themselves on the line when they put this out there. Well, I'll tell you what then, let's boldly go and have a look at Missile to the Moon.
Hey, listen. There's someone following us.
No chance of that. Your hearing is more sensitive through your receiving set. Just some loose rock sliding.
Yeah, space movies were very much being explored, weren't they, in the 50s, the 60s? You know, there was obviously the moon landing, everybody was getting very excited about what was up there. And it's funny now to look back at just how Hollywood were pushing themselves to the limits back then, haven't they?
Yes.
But in most of these movies, that's what you see, isn't it? You see special effects people almost trying things out.
That's it, and a lot of them, I mean, it's interesting that a lot of the people, we're going to talk later about Radar Men on the Moon, but the people who worked on that, they went on to be some of the major special effects people in the 70s and the 80s. This was kind of like a training ground for what can you make out of some cardboard, a couple of pieces of sellotape, and manage to get it look realistic on the screen. But it was a great training ground for people. What have you got around you? Let's make it. Let's, you know, think it up, and let's just do it.
It's a here's one we made earlier sort of scenario, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
Back into colour now, and forward to 1978 for a film called The Alpha Incident.
Yeah, this is it's got a taste of Night of the Living Dead, except this time it's a virus from Mars that everybody's terrified of. This time they're trapped in a railway station, and the interesting thing with this one is that the virus will only kill them if they fall asleep. So you have that very tense, the various characters within the railway station who are trying to stay awake. If they fall asleep, then probably their brains are going to explode. So of course this is real psychological. How are we going to deal with it? The frustrations of being in that tight environment. Really, really excellent dialogue, really good character piece. So a little bit different, but same thing again, just a fabulous one to have in there.
It is. I've seen this one, so and exactly that. It ought to be sponsored by a coffee brand. There's a fantastic way of keeping you awake at night. Isn't it? Let's have a look at The Alpha Incident.
It's a shipment of a relatively unknown, potentially dangerous substance.
I don't understand.
Well, unfortunately, there's not much to understand at this moment, except that we've all been, let's call it, quarantined.
Quarantine? That means that we're all sick. Nobody can come near us or else they're gonna get it too, don't it?
That's a good enough explanation for now. Let's say that precautions have to be taken because of the nature of the substance.
Well, how long do we have to stay here?
I don't know that yet.
It sounds like a lot of double talk to me. I got work to do. I'm getting out of here.
So there we go. We're on Mars, the moon. There's this theme sort of starting to develop, isn't there? Our penultimate one to talk about tonight, this is back to the 60s and back to black and white again, is Atomic Rulers, another out-of-this-world production.
And this one is fantastic because it is actually made up of a couple of episodes of a Japanese serial. So it has that little bit of Japanese movie bonkers to go with it, just to add to the mix. And here we've got the Emerald Planet, which hopefully we'll be seeing in a minute. The creatures on the Emerald Planet are just fantastic, and they send Starman to the Earth to save the Earth from a potential nuclear holocaust. And Starman, precursor of Superman, you know, those first kind of flying scenes, but he's just brilliant, from the costume to the words to everything. He's kind of our first superhero. So yeah, this one's going to be a real treat.
Let's have a look at Atomic Rulers.
Though they are fierce fighters when it comes to defending and protecting their way of life, the Emerald Men are basically creatures of peace. But now, once again, their very existence is threatened by the madness of certain human beings of the planet Earth. The Emerald Men are aware that should nuclear war erupt on Earth, the atmosphere of this whole area of the universe would become deadly poison. Therefore, peace must be ensured on Earth. But now an aggressive nation, that of Mongolia, plans to take over the world through the use of hidden atomic weapons, which they're smuggling into every country on the globe. The Mongolians must be stopped, and there is only one way the Emerald Men may be able to achieve this. The scientists of the Emerald Planet have invented one of the most ingenious mechanisms the universe has ever seen. Called a globe meter, it is carried on the wrist. It enables its wearer to do three things: to fly through space, to detect radioactivity, and to speak and understand every language on the planet Earth. Finally, this great forum of the Emerald Hierarchy reaches a decision. In order to save Earth from the attacks of the Mongolians, they must once more present the globe meter to one of their fellow creatures and send him to Earth.
Right, and Jules, our final one to talk about this week, it feels like it's gone by in an absolute whiz this, is Radar Men on the Moon, not to be confused with Missile to the Moon. Strategic targets on Earth being destroyed by unknown weapons and all sorts of things going on in this, aren't there?
Yeah, what I've done here is, because some of the movies tend to be a little bit shorter, and we've got this lovely 2-hour slot to fill, so I thought, you know what, where we can, let's do a double bill. Let's do it like the drive-in, let's do it like the Saturday morning special. So Radar Men from the Moon is actually a Republic serial. There were 12 episodes starring Commander Cody, and you've just got to watch this guy take off in his flying jacket. It's amazing. You can't even see the strings. So basically he uncovers a plot that that the people from the moon are coming to take over Earth, and it's down to him to save it. So it's got that wonderful cliffhanger every episode, and where we can, we'll be sneaking one of those episodes in after the movie just as an extra treat.
Like good old Saturday morning picture show stuff, isn't it? That sort of thing.
Exactly.
Jules, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to it. 10 o'clock on a Sunday. They don't make them like this anymore, and as you'll see, they certainly don't, do they? That's all we've got time for this week, but don't forget, as I say, they don't make them like this anymore. He's on Big Centre TV now every Sunday. More movie news and reviews, same time next week. Until then, have a good week. We'll see you soon.